AMD will launch a new Ryzen 7000 line with low prices against low-cost Intel processors. The third quarter of 2022 turned out to be one of the most difficult for AMD in many years. Note that just 5 years ago, the Reds were on the verge of ruin, having huge debts and a lot of useless, outdated and unclaimed technologies on the market. The release of Ryzen processors based on the Zen architecture will not only solve financial problems, but also seize the initiative in both the consumer and server markets. According to Lisa Su, in the current situation, the company will focus its efforts on the server area, since this segment brings maximum margins and develops by leaps and bounds. It was assumed that the release of desktop processors of the Ryzen 7000 series would allow us to wait out the fall in consumer demand, but underestimating the potential of Intel led to the fact that AMD had a good line with no prospects for existence. Many of our readers may have heard that the processors themselves are more expensive than the blue competitors, but they are inferior to them both in games and in work tasks. The logic of pricing is unclear to us, but Lisa Su continues to stand her ground. Perhaps the reason is that simply reducing the cost will not help here, because you need to buy an expensive motherboard and RAM. The transition to the AM5 socket was not without problems, and as a result, even a budget line based on the B650 chipset costs from $200 in European stores and is more expensive in Russian retail. RAM of the DDR5 standard only increases the final price of the assembly, and the installation of RAM of the previous generation is not provided. It seems that AMD management began to realize the danger of losing the desktop processor market, because today there were reports about plans to release low-cost versions of several gems. We are talking about Ryzen 9 7900, Ryzen 7 7700 and Ryzen 5 7600. As you can see, all processors are devoid of the letter X, which means they will get a lower clock speed. The 12-core Ryzen 9 7900 will be able to run at 5.4 GHz, which is exactly 200 MHz slower than the Ryzen 9 7900X offers. The 8-core Ryzen 7 7700 runs at 5.3 GHz, which is just 100 MHz slower than the Ryzen 7 7700X offers. Well, the Ryzen 5 7600 will be able to accelerate to 5.1 GHz, which is also 200 MHz less than the Ryzen 5 7600X. It is still difficult to assess the performance degradation resulting from a lower clock speed, but prices will be significantly lower. So, for the older model with 12 cores, they will ask for $429, Ryzen 7 7700 will be sold for $329, and Ryzen 5 7600 is estimated at $229. Thus, we see a reduction in the cost of $70 and above, and today we can assume that with such a simple solution, AMD management plans to drop prices without harm to the image. Agree that it would be ridiculous if a month after the release of the most anticipated processors of recent years, Lisa Su would start offering them at discounts. Investors will definitely not appreciate such tricks. Experts believe that the stones will perform well in single-core tasks, and the performance will not be much lower than the models currently on sale. At the same time, due to the limited TDP at 65W, it is not necessary to hope for high performance in work tasks that require maximum performance of all cores. Ordinary gamers did not care much about such nonsense, but those for whom all 12 cores are important, let them watch the tests and draw the appropriate conclusions. Fortunately, these aren't all the trump cards that can be found up Lisa Su's sleeve. The fact is that AMD has a promising 3D V-cache technology. On sale you can find an 8-core Ryzen 7 5800 by 3D processor, which many call the fastest gaming stone on the planet. Surprisingly, it manages to compete on equal terms even with the Core i9-13900K. Insiders believe that several processors with 3D V-cache technology will be available at retail in the first quarter. All of them will be based on the Zen 4 architecture, which means that they already have sky-high performance in single-core tasks. Insiders believe that in order not to compete with multi-core processors, AMD will limit itself to 6-core and 8-core models. For example, we can expect Ryzen 7 7700 by 3D or Ryzen 5 7600 by 3D.